Welcome to the Reaching Up Podcast. I'm Ron Farris.
And I'm Daniel Locke.
Social media is our topic for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting since everyone listening to this is listening to it on some form of social media.
Most likely, yeah.
So social media is a big buzzword right now, but it's probably, I guess, the only thing that's bigger than social media right now is probably AI.
Mm-hmm.
But social media is a thing.
Yeah.
And it has become a dominating force in this world that you and I live in.
Yes.
When I was your age, or maybe a little younger than you, about the time I was your age, there was basically no social media. If you wanted to have a conversation with somebody, you wrote them a letter, or you went and talked to them in person, or you called them on the phone. Back then those were actually on landlines. There were no cell phones. Yeah. So you had to do it the old fashioned way. And it had been that way for 100 years. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden we had this advent of the internet, and man, everything just went wild. Mm-hmm. I remember when all that happened. Since then it has really taken off like a rocket. And social media has become, I would argue, probably one of the dominant forces shaping our culture today, making us a worldwide culture. You and I, when we started this podcast, I don't think you or I know I had no idea that we would be reaching people in, countries all over the world. I just really didn't think about it. Mm-hmm. And the statistics tell us that, we're touching people, literally on the other side of the world. We've got listeners in India, we've got listeners in Denmark and Sweden and Australia and New Zealand and Germany and, South Africa, Canada, and all of these, all these faraway places. Mm-hmm. That is because of the world we've created and the power of social media, the reach of social media. So in a way, I guess it's a good thing because, you and I are talking to people in, South Africa that we never meet or talk to.
Yeah.
Hi y'all, if you're listening today, but at the end of the day, social media is a massive topic. So let's sort of drill down on it and make it digestible. When we talk about social media, obviously, we're talking about the big platforms that people use to connect. And that's like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, formerly known as, X, formerly known as Twitter. It seems like that's actually the name of it now. X, formerly known as Twitter. You never see the one without the other. There are others. Those are the ones that I can think of right quick, where people, billions of people, are engaged in social media stuff. It is pervasive. Almost 70% of adults, according to the Pew Research Center, and 81% of teenage adults in the United States use social media.
Dang.
So that's massive. This puts a large amount of the population into that category of people who this topic is relevant for. Yeah. And for the parents of that 81% of American teens, it's certainly an issue. And I would argue that those statistics are probably reflected in most places. And that is, of course, for one thing, because it's virtually impossible to avoid.
Yeah.
It is now right in the palm of your hand. I remember when my wife and I were making the decision as whether our boys, would get, a handheld gaming device, didn't have internet. Now you put a phone in the hand of a child in elementary school, and they are connected to the world. Mm-hmm. And,
good or bad.
And a smart child is going to find a way to access anything that is available to anyone, no matter what you do. And so it is a serious factor in what's happening in the lives of children and adults all over the world today. So
I love the social part of social media, and we call it that, but like there's absolutely nothing social about it, which is the funny part to me. And I was thinking, as I was preparing for it, I guess I was thinking about we did some studies in college. So like 2000, right around 2020, basically, a little before. And so it was right after we were starting to get, it's kind of the first data for social media as it has ramped up quite a bit. And then, so I don't even know if this includes like when the TikTok took off in 2020 when COVID hit. But just some, I don't know, just some statistics I always went back to because it always goes to social media. But like you would think if it's social, then you're going to feel connected to people, but it really does the opposite. And so, and I know that, I don't know, I don't want it to sound like a couple of boomers saying, well, social media is bad and you shouldn't do all this. But I think there's some wisdom in understanding how it's affecting you. And I think it's unwise to not think of how it affects you. But like, so just for depression and anxiety. And it said adolescents who use social media, a study by JAMA Psychiatry in 2019, adolescents who use social media more than 3 hours per day are at increased risk of mental health problems like depression, anxiety, and heavy social media users, so 5+ hours a day. And that you'd think like there's no way there's kids like 100%. Like people joke about how much they use it, especially over the summer. You got nothing else to do. Heavy social media users, 5+ hours a day, are almost 3 times more likely to feel depressed than those that use less than 1 hour a day.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Well, it is crazy. There's just and I love it that we have a good availability of statistics on social media use. Interestingly, there is very little substantive studies being done on the negative effects of social media because, of course, it is such a moneymaker and such an important part of our economic and social world. But one of the statistics I was looking at says that nearly 95%, almost 100% of teens between 13 and 17 are using social media. So it is, and there was more than a third of those, over 30%, report that they use it almost constantly. Now, you and I both know that you can walk into any school, any restaurant, any place. I was down at the state capitol recently. I actually took a picture of it and put it on my social media page of just a row of kids. They were pages in the House of Representatives. The pages in the House, are young kids that have come up from the high school level that are, having the privilege of working in the legislature for a week. And, it takes a lot of pull to get you there. There were 8 or 10 of them lined up, and every one of them, instead of talking to each other and learning about these other, young people who had been coming from all over the state for this privilege to be in the Capitol for that week, and the things they were learning, there 7 or 8 of them, they're all with their head down, looking at their phone, just going at it. They're not talking to each other. Yeah. And I thought, this is what you were saying earlier. They're using social media and they're failing to connect with the human being sitting right next to them. I've lost track of the times that I've seen a couple. I watched it this past weekend in a restaurant, in an expensive restaurant. It was what you'd call fine dining. A lot of people spending money to be there. I watched a couple, a man and a lady. Actually, I watched 2 couples that were there, and they're ordering wine, they're ordering, expensive food, I don't know, they're dropping a bunch of money to be there. And when the waiter wasn't standing at their table talking to them, they weren't talking to each other. They were both on their phones. And I'm thinking, what is it that is drawing them into this? Well, let's talk about that for a second. So, as it turns out, social media has a reinforcing nature. We talked about this in our episode on addiction. The brain is the thing that the chemical in our brain that gives us pleasure, the feeling of pleasure, of the happiness, of satisfaction, as you call it a million things, is dopamine. And dopamine is a reward, part of the brain's reward system. And human beings tend to want to continue to do things over and over again, the actions that release dopamine, because that's the goal, is to feel that dopamine. And guess what? Using social media has been proven to activate the brain's reward centers by releasing dopamine. It's the same thing that powers our desire to have sex or to eat food or to engage in social interaction, but we're getting it through engagement with a device. And instead of using any of those other things that are normal, we can get that hit instantly just by whipping out our telephone or our laptop or our computer at work, and experience that dopamine without having to involve another person. It's much simpler just to get what we want with a minimal amount of effort. And guess what? The people who are designing social media websites are well aware of that. They have, in fact, built these platforms and designed them to be addictive. And so it's no shock that this is being associated with anxiety, depression, and even physical ailments because it is so prevalent in our nature. So
do you think the algorithm's going to cut this out because we're talking bad about it?
Well, that's a great question.
It's going to stir it up because it's going to be a hot topic, It's
well, it depends.
Is AI going to shut us down or not?
Well, we'll find out, I guess. If you're actually seeing this on your chosen platform, then I guess maybe we made the algorithm cut this week. But you may never hear from us again. So be sure and subscribe so that doesn't happen to you. But so a couple of interesting statistics I thought. So many statistics, and we don't want to get stuck in those, but statistics are measurements, scientific based, supposedly. Not all statistics are, but try to ferret those out. One study says that while teen males tend to express aggression physically, and you and I grew up in Mississippi, so we know what that's like. You grew up in a house full of brothers. You know what it means. Men, when they're in their teenage years, aggression is something you experience quite a bit. It just sort of seems natural. Females do exhibit aggression by excluding others and sharing hurtful comments. That's a difference between men and women. It's just statistically proven, scientifically confirmed. And social media increases the opportunity for people to use those harmful interactions. So it is speculated that that social media may pose more of a threat for females because that is a systematically repeated phenomenon that is how females handle aggression, is to criticize. And so you see more of that happening in social media. And it's not uncommon for people to have just outright rows on Facebook. I hear about it all the time. All adults are vulnerable. Plastic surgeons have reported in the last few years an uptick in requests from patients who want to look like their filtered Snapchat and Instagram photos and selfies. So it's having an effect. And, the thing for us intelligent people to do is just to stop and say, okay, what does this mean? What does it mean? A New York Times article in 2018, this is nothing new, featured a newly wedded couple who had separated after their honeymoon because the wife spent more time on the trip planning and posting selfies with her husband than she did in spending time with her husband. And it destroyed their marriage, before it ever started. Pretty crazy stuff. In 2023, our United States Surgeon General put out a warning called Social Media and Youth Mental Health Advisory, which had a whole host of information and interesting stuff. I will read one part of it. It said, frequent social media use may be associated with distinct changes in the developing brain in the amygdala, which is important for emotional learning and behavior, and the prefrontal cortex, of course, which is important for impulse control, emotional regulation, and moderating social behavior, and could increase sensitivity to social rewards and punishments, which could explain why we are seeing, in my opinion, we are seeing and witnessing an increase in volatility in our country today. People are by virtue of their social media use in the formative years, redefining the way that their generation will deal with aggression. And I see it. I mean, I may be the only one, but I certainly think it's something. And of course, the classic examples of the harmful effect of social media have to do with the way that teenagers handle each other. There are a host of risks to teenagers. The interesting thing, you mentioned this earlier, they have a desire to connect with others, and they have a fear of missing out. FOMO. It's a thing.
Yeah.
And they are experiencing, as always been true with teenagers, social pressure, expectations. And then they have something we didn't have when we were young, maybe, or maybe you did. I didn't. A hyper connectivity to technology. Everything now is about technology. And then there are those just normal feelings of stress, anxiety, depression, or boredom, which are hyper activated by interaction with social media, because if you are feeling left out and not connected, then everything depends on your social media experience. And even though that's not connectivity, it's where that culture goes for connectivity. If you're not getting the likes, if you're not getting, the followers, then you are not relevant as a human being. And the reality is it has nothing to do with your interpersonal relationships. You're probably neglecting relationships, including your most intimate relationships, to maintain an effective social media presence and to look happy all the time, to look perfect. And it sets the bar way too high. Yeah. So many people are experiencing loss of self-esteem, negative self-esteem, and even increases in rates of suicide have been attributed to the effect of exclusion and criticism in social media.
Yeah. So we've read a lot of statistics, and I'm thoroughly depressed already, and I'm sure everybody else is too. So let's go. I'd like to go with this. So what has been your experience with social media? What have you? I don't know. What have you noticed about it? What have you done to help yourself control it, I guess, if that's ever been a thing? I wonder what it looks like for someone hearing this who has never tried to put any kind of safeguard on it, to like limit the amount of time on it, to not do nighttime scrolling. So like it's like, because most likely it's affecting your sleep. You're not able to be present with people. You can't stand to sit still. You can't stand to, if there's a lull in conversation or an awkwardness, you're just going to pull out your phone and start, I'm going to look up and see if there's any, did I miss any new sports news? Because I have to know the new sport. Like, and I'm guilty of it, so I'm not going to say like we're above this. So what does it look like in your life? And then I'll share what it looks like in my life.
All right. Well, okay. So fair question. And there's maybe a little generational divide between you and me. I didn't grow up with social media, so I wasn't addicted to it. I watched it come on to the scene in my adult years. I was a young adult, no doubt about that. But I have watched it become what it is, so I am naturally more wary of it. I'm also somebody who really is interested in statistics, and I am interested in what's actually the reality of a situation, and I don't just go with the flow, and just become a victim of it like everybody else. Typically, I am. I think just because of my faith, I am quite eager to be sure that nothing interferes with the quality of my life. And my life is centered around a spiritual experience, and anything that interferes with my spiritual experience is bad. And social media is one of those things that I think could do that. I do not want anything in my life that makes that distorts my concept of what's important. To me, it's more important for me to have a personal relationship with you than it is to have a social media experience with 1,000 people. So I don't spend a lot of time. I have a Facebook account. I have an Instagram account. I have a Snapchat account, which I've used up really basically only to communicate with my son, who also preferred Snapchat. Now he doesn't, so I haven't used it in probably over a year. But I do have Instagram and Facebook, and on those sites, if you're a friend of mine, and I have quite a few friends, they're just people that I know that have befriended me more or less, because I don't go out looking for friends. I use it to keep up on local news. When is my high school class going to have a get together and eat event down in the city where I grew up? I keep up with family birthdays and stuff like that. I use it to keep me engaged with the people I love. I also sometimes get news there, probably more so. I don't have cable television. I turned it off several years ago. Haven't missed that scrolling through the 150 channels every night for something to watch. I just stay away from that. So I use social media a lot of times to get my news. What's going on in my community. Take that with a grain of salt, of course. But it does tell me when people have died, or when people are getting married, or people have experienced some illness in their family or something like that. And really beyond that, I don't do a whole lot with it. I do post pictures of things that I find interesting. I'm not one of these people who posts lots and lots and lots of pictures of my own face. I don't try to look perfect. If you see something on my Facebook page, it's probably, it can be a snail recently. It can be a flower, that I passed on the path while I was, running, or it could be a sunset, or, just the reflection of the moonlight on the water on my lake. It's the things that I find beautiful in God's world, and I'm sharing it with the people who watch me. My sunsets are real popular. Sunrises, sunsets, on the lake, get a lot of comments. And when I miss a few weeks without posting one, people actually come up to me and ask me when I'm going to post another one. So people are reading this stuff.
Yeah.
But I use it on a guarded basis and a limited basis. I don't let it dominate my day. It's not, if something exciting happens to me, I am not struggling to try to get it into my social media feed as soon as possible. That's really a secondary thought with me. I may put something up when it's really, really meaningful and important to me. I do not ever comment on like politics or anything like that online. I don't, that's not, in my opinion, I just set a boundary with that. I'm not, you're not going to see my political opinions on my social media pages. You're not going to hear me rant and rave about the people. I'm not going to use, that have offended me or bothered me. You're not going to see me use it to attack other people. I see that all the time. I typically will immediately stop following those people because I don't need that in my life. That's not that. I just don't think that's appropriate behavior. So, I guess I set lots of boundaries around my social media use. What about you?
I think that's a very wise way to look at it. I have no social media right now. I have had it in the past. When TikTok first came out, I was like, "This is awesome. This is the greatest thing." It's like a progression from Vine, and it's
highly addictive.
It's highly addictive. It's like the first 2 weeks, like I swear I saw 2 to 3 a.m. every single morning because I'm just scrolling, and then you'd have that person like, "Hey, you've been scrolling for a second. You should take a break and think about going to sleep." Like there was literally that person. If you scroll for a certain amount of time, like an hour or something, I was just like, "Nah, I'm good." And literally 2 to 3 a.m. over and over, I was like, "This is a problem." And so I've had Facebook, Instagram, all those things. I don't have any of it now for different reasons. I think. I'm not going to say that everyone's answer is just like, well, if we quit it cold turkey, the world would be better. Because I know some people might subscribe to that idea. I think it's a very wise thing to just, hey, let's figure out what the boundaries are going to be. I love it. And even in some of the research they found, like it's not all bad. Like you said, like it's how we communicate now. Like if my church is doing something, like they're probably going to put on social media, like the community might not find out about it unless we do this, like local news, stuff like that. Like it's not all bad, and that's what I think some of the proponents are like, it's all bad, we can't do it. But like, it does help you a little bit to stay connected like that. But I think the problem comes when that's all we're trying to do is to connect, or that's all we've known. I think And I don't know how much I can speak to this, but like even just being very careful of what you allow your kids to do, because they're so influenced by it and they don't know how to self-regulate yet.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to put boundaries on it. And so if the parents are supposed to be the boundaries, like I'm terrified of when my kids get to that age, because it's just like I know what we're going to look at, or I know how we're going to treat it. But as far as like somebody else, like how many 8-year-olds just have an iPhone with high-speed internet to go anywhere they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the way you've come about it is a very wise way to do it. And I think it also takes knowing what you know you're capable of, right? Like I don't want to have to worry about it, and so I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to use it. I think if I'm going to keep up with people, and I'm going to do life with people, it's way more meaningful if I go grab coffee with somebody, if I do call them on the phone, if I do those things that you had to do before. Like that makes me feel connected. Like if we're sitting, because I'm guilty of it. Like in college, when you walk into a class, if you don't know anybody, immediately let's just scroll through Facebook and see what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at those. Let's raise my unrealistic expectations of what I should be doing. Let me compare.
Well, and all of a sudden you fit in because everybody else is doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but
nobody's meeting anybody.
And
else.
You are the weird guy if you're like, hey man, how you doing? I'm Daniel. What's up? What's your name? Where are you from? Oh, that's cool. Like get to know somebody. But in those weird instances where you do have to talk to people, you learn a lot about people, and then you feel connected. And
imagine
it's like,
that.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't want us to hear. I don't want people to hear that we're like, all social media is bad. It's only bad. But I think there's some wisdom in maybe saying what would happen. Just what would happen. We talked about it in the addiction thing, like addiction podcast. Like what would happen if you said, I'm going to set, because now you have time limits that you can set on it, or be notified like, hey, it's been 30 minutes, it's been an hour, like you've met your social media for the day or whatever.
Right.
What would happen if you said, all right, out of all the social media, like all of them, whatever you have, because most people have more than one, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, all those. If you just said it's like, I'm only going to do 30 minutes a day. And you tried to say, I'm not going to do it before bed. I'm going to do it at specific times so I can look up news or see the people that I want to see, the followers, and not just scroll deep and keep going and going and going and going and going and see, just to take up time to either numb out, to take up time to feel like you're not connected to people. How difficult would it be if you said, I'm only going to do it 30 minutes a day? How difficult would that be? How much free time would you have to actually spend doing something else?
Well, you'll find out whether you're addicted or not. You know, if you can't stop, and there are people, social media addiction is a thing. If you can't stop without help, then that's a sign that it's problematic. Well, that's one of the great examples of suggestions that the experts out there have, is that families create a social media plan where they set boundaries for themselves, parents included, and the children, and then have some way to hold each other accountable for that, to try to limit the use. It's like pretty much anything else. There are a lot of good things in the world that by abuse can become bad things, but the things themselves aren't bad. It's just that we tend to obsess and indulge and make them bad. And of course, that's what addiction is. It's just misuse of something that might very well, in other contexts, be good. Without social media, you wouldn't be able to listen to our podcast, right? Yeah. So, it's not all bad. Another thing is to create tech-free zones and encourage in-person interactions. It's amazing to me that you have to encourage human beings to engage with other human beings, but that is actually a thing. You said it, not using these devices around bedtime or meal times. Those are times reserved for, either personal introspection, which goes out the window with a lot of people who are just engaged in social media. They're not learning how to just sit and think about their day. They're caught up in entertainment of what's happening, anything but them. Prioritizing family relationships, building social bonds. Those are all important things in a human culture. And then finally, it's highly suggested that parents demonstrate how to do this to their children, because there are a
Mhm.
lot of parents who are absolutely as bad as their kids.
Oh yeah.
And that is an example that they're setting that their kids have no reason but to follow. So, parents should model good behavior for the kids. So, anything else on this topic?
I don't think so. I
All
think
right.
it's not all bad. It's not all good. There's a little bit in both.
Absolutely. Well, the idea, and we do this in every episode, is just to think about these things that we talk about.
Mhm.
Speaking of talking, next time we'll talk about joy
Mhm.
as a concept.
Yep.
So with that, we'll round up our discussion. Thanks for listening to the Reaching Up podcast. We do appreciate you listening. If you're on YouTube, be sure and hit that like button for us. Subscribe, tap the bell button. Be sure and get our next episode on Spotify, iHeart, Apple. Be sure and follow us. Leave comments if you like. We look at all of those and we appreciate those. Other people seem to like them too. Rate us on any of those platforms. Check us out on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, in a healthy way. And reach out to us by email, which sounds like the most antiquated version of communication nowadays, which is fascinating. But we do have an email address, and we do read those emails, and we respond to emails. Contact@reachinguppodcast.com. Thanks for listening.